I fell in love with a Womanoid from Ceti. Star Post 16, October 25, 27. Dear Mom, well, here goes nothing. The month-long voyage from our Earth to the Tau Ceti star system is ending, and lots will be happening in this corner of the galaxy. I guess the thing topping the happening list is that I, your son Ethan, and a perpetual knot in your stomach, remain on a collision course with the matrimonial firestorm. Years ago, you told me to wait until I became a little older, until the time was right, and I waited. So what are you complaining about? I know my future wife isn't quite human, but don't act like such a bigot. Where's your sense of extraterrestrial equality? Just teasing. I can't wait to see my future in-laws again. The interstellar ship I'm on, the Petunia, is moving toward the fifth planet from the star. It's charted as Tau Ceti E, but the natives have their own relevant name for this ball of wild weather. You're going to love this. The planet is called Dracheimshire, which is the Irish word for bad weather. Let me explain. Dracheimshire, or Drach for short, has been a trade partner with Earth for a long time, with I think the Centauri system being the only partner we've had longer. This will be the fourth time I'll be docking at Drach since I joined the merchant fleet. The Drachians are a very curious, imitative bunch, and they fell in love with Earthling cultures, particularly the Irish way. Just by looking at the planet, I can understand. The mid-latitude regions of Drach are remarkably like Ireland. Cool, moist air, cloudy skies, and lots of vegetation. I'll go into more details after we attain orbit and I have more time. Right now, give Pop my best, and I'll post you soon. Star Post 19, October 25, 27. Dear Mom, we made it safe and sound. As soon as we hyperglided into the star system, our bridge crew offlined the dark energy warping engines and ignited the fusion reactor. Dark energy fills every nook and cranny of that black nothingness we fly through. Hence, there's no such thing as empty space. Physicists grappled and argued with that idea, and it was only a matter of time before the eggheads actually found a way to push, pull, and twist it to serve our purposes. In amateur terms, the Tau Ceti system is a dirty system. Dust, pebbles, and rocks permeate the space around the star and its revolving planets. Despite the ship's screens, our pilot, Jim Flanagan, he has his own Drachian cheering section, chose a flight path that took us over the plane of the ecliptic, avoiding potential mishaps, and we entered orbit from the top of the planet like spiraling down a funnel. Once in the exosphere, we unloaded our commodities and jammed them into awaiting Drachian space freighters. They returned the favor and filled our cargo bays with their exports. Most of what we bring them is metal ore. This system never had much in the way of heavy metals, and they cannot get enough of them. The Drachians use silver, iron, and several other ores for manufacturing just about everything under Tau Ceti. They've developed uncanny methods of producing alloys that Earthlings can't quite get the hang of. One creation is living metal. It grows and fixes itself by drawing metallic ions from the ground and the air, and even space. Spaceships made of this material can go where electromagnetic shielding can't. I wonder how long it will be before do-gooders claim it's cruel and unethical to enslave the stuff. For the time being, though, we loaded the living metal and everything else into our ship for the return trip home. After the transfer, a shuttle transported the crew down to the planet for leave. On one of the earlier planet leaves, I met Erin, my soon-to-be, if you recall. Well, why rehash? You know the story. She was working on base, and I was minding my own business, and like a true outer-space gold digger, she charmed me around her tentacle. I mean finger. Just to remind you, genetic reengineering has been glitch-free for 100 years. As long as the organism is carbon-based, geneticists can transform it into any other being. And I know what you're thinking, but Erin is just as carbon-based as you are. It's a family that I'm worried about. Anyway, we know that interstellar law prohibits evolving lower organisms and devolving higher ones. I find it both amazing and flattering that any stellar species can be so enamored by Earth and the Earthlings. And yet, here are the Drakians. They have us beaten slightly in the brains department, so you'd think they'd be serious, intellectual, and owlish, which I guess some are. The vast majority, though, have a childlike worship of us. It's like the Drakians are the sports fanatics and the Earthlings are the professional athletes. I wouldn't call them suck-ups, just big fans. To change the subject slightly, let me tell you about the planet. Drak is a tad larger than Earth, but because it lacks Earth's density, gravity feels a zinkle less. Not much less, only a zinkle. I always thought of Ireland as the land of eternal spring, but this area of Drak is more like autumn. What's the difference, you ask? Well, spring is fresh and bright and new. This place, on the other hand, has a different look about it. It's dark and old. The air is fresh and crystal clear, of course, because the populace doesn't know how to create pollution. It's everything else. There's an eerie quiet when the wind settles that some might call tranquility, while others might call slumber. The planet is a lot older than Earth, so the landscape takes on a rounded look. Plate tectonics are at a crawl, so there aren't too many mountain ranges on the planet. From where I stand, rolling hills surround us like a dell. The plant life, genetically altered to resemble the grasses and ferns and ivy of Ireland, is ubiquitous. Craggy trees and prickly bushes extend throughout the moors. Top it all off with a cheerless blue-gray sky, and that's Waterford, Erin's homeland. Anyway, my next stop is Erin's house to see her and her family. Wish me luck. Star Post 21 October 2527. Dear Mom, while pondering what to do in my clueless state of mind, along came Erin in a four-wheel buggy to rescue me from a long, confusing trek to her house. She effervesced as always, and we embraced. Ma, she couldn't keep her appendages off me. I loaded my bags into the available space and we headed for home. Somebody, or something, named the village Waterford because it's on the River Suir, just like the Waterford in Ireland. I guess the river's name came first, but who knows? Drakians think a little differently than Earthlings. Where we go from A to B to C, like in mathematics, they'll go A, B, C all at once, or in different orders. I hate to admit it, but Drakians see things that humans don't. That's for another discussion. Anyway, there are other geographical similarities that are not worth mentioning, and when you put them all together, the two Waterfords became sister cities a long time ago. Naturally, many of the road names are the same, which brings me to this experience. I had never actually been to Erin's house. I met her family and had some limited socializations with them, but it was in the main section of town, not on the outskirts where they live. Well, this day I was going in. We started out on Outer Ring Road along the river with Erin driving. An overcast, windy day started us off, but at least the starlight penetrated the thin cloud cover. After several minutes, and with our itinerary unswervingly intact, we turned onto Cork Road and drove away from the river. We passed the Tourist Information Center and then merged onto Dunmore Road, staying on it for only a minute before veering off onto a coarse gravel road. In my uneasy bewilderment, we followed this tortuous, bouncy, one-lane zigzag for about 10 minutes until I suspected that we would never see civilization again. We drove deeper and deeper into a deserted wooded bog populated by tall, creepy pines and thick green undergrowth. Next, we cautiously turned onto a bumpy dirt trail. The enveloping dust cloud forced us to seal the buggy and then travel no faster than a crawl. I believe, although unspoken, even Erin's sensibilities questioned her parents' choice of home locale. When the choking soot settled, we found ourselves among timbers so tall and dense that they blocked the view of Ceti. Before I go any further, Mom, I think it's time to tell you about the true physicalness of the Drakians. Well, you gotta get a load of them. You know, we can't all be humans. Let me put it another way. The meteorites that delivered the amino acids to Earth, which started life, also delivered the same amino acids everywhere else, including Drakheimshire. So you see, we're the same. We just look different. By now I'm making you feel better or you're on the floor unconscious. To get to the point, Drakians are serpentine, with differences. In their natural form, they grow to about 2 meters long, and like snakes, they have no legs. But they do have arm things. Drakians do not slither on their bellies, but rather move upright like dignified cobras. They move and stand in this position, and they don't need chairs. But don't dwell on a snake's appearance because there are differences. Remember those plump caterpillars that used to eat Pop's tomatoes in his victory garden? I think they're called tomato hornworms. Well, Drakians most closely resemble those things. I think it's a funny coincidence that Drakians love tomatoes. Drakians have amazingly dexterous and sensitive arm-like appendages that look like twigs or plant roots. They can do anything arms and fingers could do, plus more. And Drakians have eyes and ears and mouths and olfactory organs. And of course they're green. They're us in a different package. Genetic transformations are really windows into the soul, so to speak. Those who choose the remolding of their bodies seem compelled by their own personalities, their own chronological ages, and their own personal appearances. Whether or not they are aware of it, a member of one species will change itself into the exact equivalent of another species. Psychobabble. The one sore point I have, though, concerns those who are not emotionally stable enough for the genetic metamorphosis, especially on this planet. On Earth, we take the changing of form seriously, with a few jokes from our friends and family. We get months of counseling, there are lots of inner conflicts, and then there's a pile of legal paperwork to pour through. It's very permanent. Not so on Drak. Out here, it's a big game. Be an Earthling this week? Then next week you might change to a Centaurian. Or maybe you'll have part of your body humanoid and another part Drakian. It irks me. But I digress. Erin is fully human and absolutely beautiful. It's easy to elevate her to the level of the angels, especially here on planet Tomato Worm. But it's more than mere appearance that attracts me to her. I think it's the completeness of her qualities. Tall and thin, her most alluring attributes are her blue almond-shaped eyes that exude intelligence and her perfectly groomed, shoulder-length blonde hair that frames her countenance to perfection. Now that I think of it, maybe it is all physical. However advanced and evolved the Drakians are, they love their nature and they love their space. The planetary population is only a couple of billion, so there are plenty of both. When Erin and I stopped, I got my first look at their house, which set me at ease. It's a one-story cottage that's actually larger than I expected, considering that only 4 peopleoids inhabit it. The roof looks like thatch and the red siding looks like wood, but everything's made of synthetic polymers that are weatherproof and never wear. The scene is bucolic, with a nearby lake, all surrounded by trees and shrubs. What wildlife abounds is anyone's guess, although I didn't hear any chirping of birds or buzzing of insects. As soon as we exited the buggy, Erin's family came out of the house to greet us. Despite their preoccupation with the Irish, it's strict tradition to maintain the Drakian family name, so I was warmly greeted by the Hreen family. Mary Hreen, Aaron's mother, emerged first, looking completely human, followed by Brian Hreen, Aaron's father, also completely human-looking. Or should I say, they look normal. I think their sapiens form hinted that they fully accepted me into the family. Brian is in his early 60s, and standing shoulder to shoulder, the top of his head comes to my chin. He bears heavily muscled, sloping shoulders, knotted forearms to moor a ship, and a ruddy complexion. He stood facing me, a cemented-down comb-over glinting in the light, grinning like a blue-eyed child anticipating a hot dog lunch. A powder blue shirt hung lopsidedly off his bulging shoulders, a telltale sign that Mary didn't dress him today. Mary, on the other hand, is noticeably taller than Brian. Where he's rounded, she's sharp-featured. High cheekbones protrude from a narrow face, and a long sliver of a nose splits her two light blue eyes right down the middle like a knife. She has gray-brown porcupine hair, and today, as with every day I've seen her, she was wearing her trademark slacks, sweatshirt, and suede loafers. Then out came Kevin, Aaron's younger brother. Kevin has a sense of humor that knows no bounds. About a year ago, Kevin and I were having lunch together, and he told me that he thought earthworms were the most handsome life forms on Earth, he strongly resembling one. I forgot about it until today. Then, right behind Aaron's father, Kevin came up to greet us, slithering and wiggling like a giant earthworm. A completely revolting presence. To top it off, Kevin sported a human face and a bouquet of wild red hair. Aaron screamed, I cringed, and his parents shook their heads in embarrassment. At that point, we all entered the abode with our heads lowered. As I mentioned, this was my first visit to their residence, and though quaint on the outside, it's ultra-modern on the inside. Mary seems to have an aversion to natural woodwork, so basically the place looks like a laboratory. One bit of family strife occurred that reaffirmed my belief that people are the same everywhere. Inside the house, I commented that the stone floor looked great. Brian nodded with satisfaction. It's not stone, it's better, he said. It's a new type of material called marble or marblo. Mary, he asked, what's this called? She had no answer. Whatever, he continued unfazed. It lays like tile, but is actually harder than diamond. Nothing can damage or scratch the stuff. It's not harder than diamond, Kevin scoffed. Anything can be scratched. Anything, but not this stuff, Brian assured us. I'll scratch with a diamond right now, Kevin stated. Don't do it, Mary warned. Go ahead, Kevin. Prove me right, Brian challenged. Kevin must have had it planned, because he already had a diamond ring in a hand that suddenly sprouted from his body. Nothing may bear up to the power of Worm Man, he declared. Then he took a firm swipe, and a white scratch appeared on the dark marblo. Behold, a scratch! Brian stood speechless. His mouth hung open like a whale's maw. You're stupid, he growled at Kevin. You're a stupid, stupid worm brain. It's your fault, stupid, Mary yelled at her husband. You insisted he try to scratch the floor in front of an audience. Brian shut his mouth and left the room. Kevin stood like a puzzled worm. I recall going through a similar situation with you and Pop, only 12 light years closer. I'll post you in a few days. Star Post 24, October 2527. Dear Mom, it's only a week before the wedding. I wish you and Pop could have made it, but I know the expense and the inconvenience make it impossible. Besides, we're going to have another ceremony when Erin and I get back to Earth. Erin and I had a weird experience the other day, and we count ourselves lucky to be alive. But don't worry, we're fine. We had an early dinner a couple of days ago and went out to stretch our legs. A cool, dry, late afternoon soothed us, and we walked over to the lake about a kilometer from home. Once there, we sat on squat boulders that rested along the water's edge. It was just us, surrounded by tall grasses and drooping willows, and we sedately watched the red cloud-streaked sky fade to dark. Eventually, the air cooled against the water, and a broom bore life and settled on the lake. Desolate and heavy-hearted, the mist turned the phantasmal woods into gray walls of granite. In another place and another time, I would have expected the bodies of the recently murdered to emerge from their shallow graves. On the other hand, it might have been romantic to some people. Suddenly I snapped to alertness. Movement displaced the water, as if something was swimming in from the deeper region to the bank. Then came the sloshing, squelching sounds of footsteps in wet marsh, slow and plodding. Darkness and fog almost blinded us. Through the pitch, a deep, inhuman moan came from whatever was coming out of the lake, and it was coming toward us. We both stood, and Erin clutched my arm. She trembled. "A flesh-eater," she whispered. "Run!" I grabbed Erin's hand, and we ran as fast as we could. I heard the flesh-eater follow, so close I could hear its labored breath and smell the musty lake water on its body. But I didn't look back. Neither of us did. We broke into a clearing, found the pathway back to the cottage, and kept running. Once we found the path, the creature seemed to give up and return to its lair. Erin and I didn't stop until we got home, yelling and screaming as we approached. Brian ran out the front door, as excited as the two of us. We went inside, locked the door, then told everyone the story. Mary and Brian listened to what we had to say, then nodded to each other in agreement. Kevin stood there too, concern on his face, thankfully changed to a more human form. Brian explained that what we encountered was a genetic aberrance, a Drakian, or even a human, that purposely twists and mangles its genetic code until it becomes a monster, usually one of legend. The beings that do this to themselves are nuts to begin with, and the physicians who supply the means probably share the same world vision. By morning, the Drakian authorities had scoured the region and removed our monster and any other monsters hiding out. They'll get the usual reverse transformation and brain detox. It boggles my mind that we can cure and prevent almost every disease in the known galaxy, but we can't escape the psychological damage caused by our well-meaning parents. Oops, did I just say that? Post you soon. Star Post 28, October 25-27. Dear Mom, for all the brains and technology the Drakians have, they are remarkably rotten cooks. No matter who you aspire to be or how high you climb, you cannot change the food taste you grew up with. Such is the case here on Drak. Drakians like their food bland, to the point of tasteless, and they love globules of fat. Visualize thick sausages bursting with fat with no seasoning, and that's what's on the menu 3 times a day. The other night's dinner exhibited a perfect example. On my plate lay a long link of sausage that I tactfully dissected. I separated the pearly fat nodules from the brown meat like a horse separates oats from dirt, and then dropped the revolting little adipose pellets onto a napkin. It was a culinary autopsy. Afterwards, I nibbled on the meat like a chipmunk. The next day, starving, I made the excuse that I had to go into the village for supplies and headed straight to the pizzeria. Erin was busy, so she stayed home. At the pizzeria, I bumped into 2 of my crewmates, Bob Matson and Henry Wang, and we had lunch together. Bob looks like a pea pod. He's almost rubbery. His shoulder-length blonde hair is so soiled and greasy that the strands clump together like twine. He wears shorts and a short-sleeved shirt every day of the year. When he entered the pizzeria, he stood directly over me, rocking on spindly legs so skinny that they made his knees stick out like doorknobs. Henry, quite the opposite, is neat and clean and built like a boulder. His pride, which he wears as flat as a Persian carpet, is his closely cropped black hair. But whenever I look at him, his dark, passionate eyes seem a little too close together under his dense mane, giving him the appearance of a puzzled German shepherd dog. Bob and Henry were having an intense conversation before they entered, and when they sat down next to me, the debate continued. Yes, you can travel faster than the speed of light without the warping engines, Bob pointed out. Maybe not on Earth, but in space, a spaceship can go faster than light. That's how come we sent a ship to Andromeda. The reason the atmosphere is a rainbow, he elaborated, is because gravity travels faster than light. Heisenstein was another scientist who missed the point. He said that you can go through one door but not the other, or something like that. But that's because of air pressure, not the speed of light. Henry sat with his head cupped in his hands, wincing. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, Bob told us that the moon is the other side of the sun. Neither will be my best man. Post you as soon as I can. Star Post 2, November 2527. Dear Mom, well, it's all over except for the shouting. I am a married man. I know. Where did Pop go wrong? Ma, you didn't lose a son. You gained a garden full of hornworms. I don't want to rub it in too much, so let me just tell you about the ceremony. It was unusually hot and humid that day, which annoyed the heat-sensitive Drakians. We chose Halloween as our wedding day for a couple of reasons. One, that I'm on leave. The other was that Halloween is the biggest holiday in Waterford, and maybe the entire region, being that Halloween is an Irish invention. Costumes, understandably, are not the key feature of the Drakians' festivities, because with genetics being what they are, every day could qualify as Halloween. The local clans simply enjoy socializing more than anything else, with music and dance at the top of their list. It was the 5 of us who arrived at the Waterford Civic Center in the early evening, and we entered through the front door. It's a big place, designed like a gymnasium, replete with hardwood floors and a high acoustic ceiling. The wedding would take place as soon as possible so that the Halloween party reception could get going. That's what everyone came for in the first place. I changed into a black tuxedo and Erin modeled a white gown. Nothing too fancy, but elegant enough to show the crowd that it was her special evening. Waterford's traditional Caterpillar priest conducted the ceremony, donned in St. Patrick's-style vestments. We exchanged vows with Kevin and Erin's cousin as best man and maid of honor. Everyone present cheered, and it was over. Quick and simple. Kevin turned to the crowd and sermonized, "Don't run with scissors. John 3:16's mother." And then the party started. As the couple of honor, tradition required us to wear costumes. As I should have known, Erin chose vegetable outfits, namely tomato suits. Yes, we wore tomato get-ups. We strolled the floor like 2 mutant vegetables, and while I looked for an out-of-the-way table, it was clear that Erin wanted to make our love a public spectacle. No details. The band was quite a sight. You probably didn't know this because I didn't, but Drakians use their own natural bodies to create musical sounds. Since their torsos have large bulbous air chambers, they can create an array of melodies. Horn sounds are child's play, and percussion is a cinch. They even have piano and cello down pat. Their one weakness is the high pitch of the guitar, but the band had a genuine earthling up on stage strumming away. Brian got drunk, climbed onto the stage, and started belting out his version of Irish poetry. He's no Shelley. "In ire 'tis a blessed thrill to roam green field and rolling hill, To know as you lay beneath blue so clear, I think I need another beer. By and large, the evening was going great. That was until the clock struck 9, the music stopped, and the surreal events of the Hibernian Hornworm Olympics began. Then, as I had trouble believing my ears, an announcement blasted out that the banger eating contest was ready to begin. "What's a banger?" I asked Erin. "Ooh, they're good," she replied. "Like sausages, but spicier. I'm going to enter the contest." "Go for it," I spurred. Without hesitation, she took a seat among the banger-eating behemoths. Each contestant sat or stood in front of a plate loaded with 10 kielbasa-sized bangers. The object was to eat all 10 as fast as possible, and the person who cleaned his plate in the shortest period of time was the winner. It was plainly a male-oriented contest. "Go!" the judge shouted, and the contestants reacted like frenzied sharks. Each banger took about 3 or 4 bites, but Erin, without breathing, immediately pulled ahead of the other 2 brutes beside her. I yelled encouragement, roared, and hopped like a rabbit, momentarily forgetting my embarrassment. The first 5 looked easy, but then it became a war, and her opponents were experiencing the same problems: chewing, blinking, wincing, and turning a pale shade of green. They looked like wads of chewed-up outer-space spearmint gum. Erin toughed it out and kept pace right to the last bite. Then she stuffed the last piece into her mouth and jumped up with her arms thrown high in victory, a split second before another contestant. Erin was the winner! I think her human mouth was the deciding factor. She screamed for joy, then ran over and hugged and kissed me with her mouth still full. I laughed and howled. Then, still wearing her tomato stem hat, she skipped over to our table, flopped in a chair, sweaty and exhausted, and downed a pitcher of water. Everyone went back to socializing, but 10 minutes later, the announcer notified the costume wearers that the costume dance contest was starting and to assemble on the dance floor. Erin stood erect, then pulled me along. "Let's go," she shouted, still high from her last win. I blindly agreed, and we trotted onto the dance floor. Erin's fullness of heart was infectious. The music commenced, a lively polka, and Erin and I mimicked the rhythms of our opponents, maybe outdoing them thanks to my partner. Still, enough Drakians retained their caterpillar forms to make things difficult for us. Our legs wobbled, while their genetically enhanced legs didn't, or they could slide around all night without legs. I got suspicious when the milling judge let us get away with anything. Maybe our outfits made his oral cavity water. 20 minutes into the contest, we shuffled, dead on our feet, and our costumes sagged to our knees. Erin was ready to cry. By then, we competed against only one other couple. At last, the judge walked over, and when I thought he was going to tap us out, he grabbed Erin's hand and raised it in victory. The music stopped, and the crowd exploded in cheers. I beamed gleefully at Erin, but her glittering zeal was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she stood bent and ashen. Her eyes bulged, her mouth grimaced, and her neck muscles tightened. I knew what was coming next and jumped to the side. To the crowd's horror, onto the dance floor she vomited the parts of 5 perfectly good undigested bangers. A few seconds later, the other 5 achieved flight. What kind of monster did I marry? When it was safe, I helped her to the bathroom and waited by the door. A Drakian janitor showed up with a pail and a shovel to scoop it all up. I tried to hide from view, but he directed a knowing eye my way, frowned, and shook his head. After a few minutes, Erin emerged from the restroom much more subdued and received a standing ovation from the crowd. She still had enough pluck to good-naturedly remove her stem hat and bow, but we both had our fill of partying for the night and agreed to leave. Our honeymoon is down at the equator, about a week before we start the voyage back to Earth. I think you and Pop will like Erin. What's not to like? I promise to keep her out of Pop's garden. See you soon, Ethan.